Military cooperation between China and Russia is developing quietly but steadily, and is increasingly influencing both the course of Russia's war against Ukraine and the strategic balance in the world. And although official Beijing constantly claims that, despite its limitless partnership with Moscow, it does not supply military technology to Russia, the facts say otherwise. Why did Kiev impose sanctions against a number of Chinese companies? What is NATO especially concerned about in this cooperation? And how is Europe responding? Let's break it down. According to Western intelligence, Chinese companies are supplying Russia with optics, electronics, chips, including dual-use microchips, trucks, chassis for multiple rocket launchers and air defense systems, machinery and equipment for the Russian military-industrial complex, including laser technologies. Bloomberg conducted a large-scale investigation, during which it was revealed that Moscow is actively cooperating with China in drone production as well. For example, the Russian company Arrowhead, which has set up large-scale production in Khabarovsk, has been working with Chinese specialists from the company Odal for more than 2 years. To conceal their suppliers, the Russians actively use intermediaries. For example, companies that deal with agricultural machinery or seafood transportation.
The documents show Arrowhead has been working with Autel engineers since early 2023 to localize production of the Autel Evo Max 4T drone, which was originally designed for civilian use but has proven effective in combat. Taken together, the documents show how sensitive technologies can move from China to Russia, even if President Xi Jinping's government says it's not supplying either side. From a publication by Bloomberg.
The Arrowhead company plant, which receives government funding, plans to increase drone production to 10,000 units per month this year and expand manufacturing with more advanced models. For comparison, the most well-known Russian drone manufacturer, Alabuga, produces about 3,000 drones per month. The location of the Arrowhead company plant was also chosen for a reason. The distance from Khabarovsk to the nearest Chinese border near the city of Fruyuan is only 60 kilometers, and to the international river port of Tongjiang, 300 kilometers. Technological support from Beijing allows Moscow to continue its military operations. That's why Europe is expressing serious concern about this hidden fact of cooperation.
But we also know that China's unyielding support for Russia is creating heightened instability and insecurity for Europe. We can say that China is de facto enabling Russia's war economy, and we cannot accept this. And I've always said how China continues to interact with Putin's war will be a determining factor for EU-China relations going forward. If China claims to defend the international rules-based order, then it should unequivocally condemn Russia's gross violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and internationally recognized borders, and act accordingly.
After the massive shelling of Kiev by the Russian army on the night of July 4th, investigators found Chinese-made components, specifically catapult mounts, in the downed Shahed drones. They had been manufactured just a few weeks earlier. In response, Kiev imposed sanctions on 5 companies registered in China that had supplied these parts to the aggressor country. The sanctions include a ban on conducting business in Ukraine and the freezing of all assets.
Today there is currently a new package of sanctions.
Today, there is a package of sanctions against companies from China that, unfortunately, supply components for Russian weapons production, specifically for the Shaheds. There is clear evidence of this. The parts are found in downed Shaheds. We will also discuss this with our partners so that they support Ukrainian sanctions. There is also a new decision regarding the synchronization of European sanctions within our jurisdiction. 3 more EU sanctions packages are now fully in effect in Ukraine. We will continue to strengthen our pressure.
However, it is not only the cooperation between Beijing and Moscow in the military-industrial sector that is cause for concern. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte believes that China could persuade Russia to attack one of the NATO countries. According to him, if Beijing decides to attack Taiwan, it would be necessary as a distraction. British military officials are also warning about the danger of a simultaneous armed conflict between the West and both Russia and China. According to their data, if the alliance does not speed up rearmament, this could happen within the next few years. Former Chief of the General Staff of the British Army, General Patrick Sanders, described in detail how this could happen in an interview with The Times.
The conflict could begin with a major clash in the Indo-Pacific region, such as a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which would force the U.S. to redeploy forces from Europe. In response, Russia could seize the opportunity to attack a part of NATO territory, such as the Baltics or the strategic region of Svalbard, in order to achieve a local advantage. Having captured a limited territory, they would hide behind a nuclear umbrella and challenge NATO to act if you dare. The stakes are extremely high. Patrick Sanders, Chief of the General Staff of the British Armed Forces, 2022-2024, in an interview with Time magazine.
Moreover, many experts believe that China is interested in a prolonged war that Russia has started against Ukraine. First, the West and the US are depleting their resources. Second, China gets a unique opportunity to observe the use of Western and Russian weaponry in combat conditions, to test its own technologies, and to analyze tactics without direct involvement. The official position of Beijing is as follows. I quote, "China is not a party to the conflict and does not supply lethal weapons to either Russia or Ukraine. It stands for de-escalation and peaceful negotiations." But in reality, China's interests are quite multi-layered.
China has another trump card, the North Korean army, which, also with China's encouragement, with its tacit consent, is now participating in the war on the European continent. It can be fully used by Russia against NATO, and it can also be used by China to create some tension on the Korean peninsula precisely at the moment when China is addressing its Taiwan issue. So I think I hold this opinion and, for example, I write about it in my articles. But the fact that this is already being discussed at the NATO level is very important because it is a completely realistic scenario.
And one more thing. The longer the war goes on, the more dependent Russia becomes on China economically, technologically, financially, and even diplomatically. Moscow exports oil, gas, and coal to China at significant discounts. That's why it's hard to stop China's covert support for Russia, but it can be made very costly and risky. The main mechanism here, of course, is sanctions, both personal and sectoral. Plus, monitoring of dual-use goods. And for that, we need the will and coordination of all our partners, both in the European Union and in the United States.